deep down, we know what the answers are. We know what we would have to do to have a fully energetic, vital life. And why don't we do those things? So all of a sudden, he comes over, music stops, and he goes, "Okay, Freddie, like, what do you got?"
Wow.
And everybody's just looking at me. I'm just like, my knees going like this. That loop will continue, that negative loop, until you correct it. So it'll keep coming back in different lessons in your life until you address it and walk through it.
Welcome, everybody, back to the program here at Robert Meets World podcast. And today we are speaking with another entrepreneur and another person in kind of, I guess, the wellness, holistic space. His name is Freddy Gervasi.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Perfect. And he is the founder of Soul Expansions, which is a 8-part concert with original music that kind of brings together a bunch of modalities involving breathwork, meditation, multisensory experience, visual, sound, maybe even smell, into a kind of, I suppose, like a sort of entertainment meets sort of integrative healing kind of experience. And y'all have been doing this for about like a year, or maybe more than a year at this point.
Yeah. Actually, the first time when it was all put together in this sequence and
Hmm.
with the full band, it was last February. So just
Hmm.
over a year now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the, I suppose, like impetus of like what? Well, first of all, in your words, what is soul expansions
Yeah.
to you and to the audiences and people who are coming to this kind of event or concert?
Yeah, so soul expansion to me is a beautiful way to find connection, not just with yourself, but also the people that are coming through, and this, multisensory experience where you can dive into the music a little bit deeper using these modalities,
Mm.
and then dive into some self-exploration as well. And you're in a space where you're just meeting like-minded individuals. So
Mm.
we open up the space an hour before just to have that concert-like feel. Everybody's going through, having some samples of the beautiful brands and sponsors that we have there, and just mingling and chatting, and why are you here? Why are you here? All of those types of things,
Mm.
and then it moves into this sequence of these beautiful ancient modalities that have been around for generations and generations, and I feel like we've put it in a sequence that allows it to be a little bit more approachable and a little bit more of this entertainment value with
Mm.
it as well. So you can kind of, the I guess the phrasing is like wrap the chocolate in the spinach a little bit, get everybody their vitamins, but give them a little bit of the sweet stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, just a new way to approach concert experience in a more sober, curious way as well.
Mm.
So yeah, that's pretty much the best way I can wrap it all up.
Mm. You mentioned this word here, this like sober curious, and it's kind of something that I see as emerging. Like there was I don't know if it was a study, but there's this observation that like a lot of folks in Gen Z and I suppose even millennials are starting to move away from like alcohol as a method of kind of stoking socialization. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, on the last podcast we had Adam, we were talking about
Yeah,
Othership, we were talking about
yeah,
some of these like social wellness experiences. And so your idea of soul expansions is like a reimagination of the concert with these, aspects. Because I guess even in concerts, like there you drink wine or something like
of
that.
course, yeah.
And so was there something that led up to, I guess, wrapping this experience in that sober curious mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just touch on even the other ship. So
Sure.
we can't talk about this without talking about other ship. And it's just such a beautiful space. And they started this massive wave of this, self-actualization. I feel like
Mm.
that's probably the best way to describe what they've done in such a small little piece. But I was fortunate enough to be one of the original guides there. And it just, that experience has allowed me to become everything that I've been doing over the last little bit, is very heavily influenced on what they created there, and the founding team, just beautiful people doing some cool stuff. So that it's
Mhm.
it's it's really awesome to see. And through that, my transition was going through this heavy party lifestyle, and we can get into that
Mhm.
more in detail, but just really relying on alcohol as that social lubricant, and that ability to lose my inhibitions a little bit and just feel confident and feel like I belonged, and it
Mhm.
was like this social aspect that was so normalized. And I feel as though now the world is ready to normalize other ways of being social and other ways of connecting, so that's kind of the idea of soul expansion as well, is to create this environment where that's not necessarily the norm,
Mhm.
and maybe the norm is this, more sober approach to feeling confident, or just feeling that level of connection with others and that level of connection with yourself. So with alcohol, I felt such a disconnect from myself. It was, I was able to connect more with others, but it actually brought me further away from who I actually was. And that, when I was able to zoom out, which that's a whole process in and of itself, is being able to like remove yourself from the moment and what's happening there. And I was able to do that. Just I actually took a road trip with a friend. He had been sober for, I think, 6 years, 7 years at that point, and we went down to San Diego for a month, and it was the first time since I started drinking that I hadn't drank for 30 days,
Mhm.
and it was a real eye opener for me of like, oh man, this is how much of your potential you could actually have, and with alcohol, it was maybe a fraction of that,
Mhm.
and
What was specifically down there in San Diego that triggered that sense of opening to possibility or expansion?
Yeah, so there was a couple things. I was actually going through a breakup at the time, so just getting out of Toronto was an amazing transition into that. So going down to San Diego, I was operating my CBD company at the time. So
Mhm.
we had a manufacturer down there. I was going down to different gyms and just like making connections down there, setting up some distribution pathways for the CBD brand, and we were just working out twice a day. We were going for runs in the morning, yoga at night, all of these things that were just like optimizing the body, and then allowing for a little bit of space to go inward and do meditation for the first time, and then eventually get to breath work. But yeah, so it was like a lot of this like going inward and slowing down and getting out of the party lifestyle, and that was a big eye opener for me while I was down there, and it allowed me to see, okay, this is who you can be, this is your full potential. If you want it, it's there, so
Mhm.
yeah.
There's something about that, like you just see that. I guess if you can get past the mask or the persona, as like I like to call it, and then you can sort of, I mean, iteratively, it's also developing because you're discovering more parts of yourself, and that sense of individuation itself is developing. And so you came back from San Diego and you made I suppose an ultimatum to yourself, or you made a transition to your sense of.
Yeah, yeah. So when I came back, it was going through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
So through that process, actually, this is kind of right when COVID was happening,
Mhm.
and it hadn't happened yet. We had come back from San Diego, and I'll tell you another story about the border at San Diego. At another time, being in a high risk cannabis industry,
Mhm.
coming back into Canada, that was fun. But so I'm finally back in Canada, and we have this opportunity with my cannabis company to work with Walmart. So we start just throwing the kitchen sink at this project, money, time, all of our resources into this opportunity. And I guess they must have caught wind of what was going on with COVID and
Mhm.
that approaching. We had no idea at the time, so they kind of just hit the skids on everything, and
Mhm.
all our efforts that went into that. We kind of had to just be like, oh well, I guess we're not doing that anymore, and it was
Mhm.
just sitting there. So I was a little jaded by that experience, and I was just like, well, fuck, like, okay, I gotta maybe try something else. So I started this other company, and it was more about like cross promotion and creating this, upsell experience, like basically like taking the Amazon experience, putting it on your own website,
Mhm.
so that you actually win with the other brands. So you're basically referring brands that are in the same industry.
Mhm.
So I was working on that for a little while. I had this like pop up. I was right at Ossington and Queen. It was called Carousel Club, and like it was a communal retail space. And this is when like COVID was on, off, on, off. So it
Mhm.
was very, very challenging. And we had this like shop local theme that we hope that people were helping like the local brands during this time. and and then I really jumped the shark. I ended up like, because we had 3,000 square feet of retail space, so I ended up bringing in like a band and a stage and a bar and this whole thing that just like completely went in a different direction. But it was a lot of fun, and it just showed me my love for music at that time too. I'm like, oh shit, all of this is like, I would have got rid of all of that stuff and just kept the band and just kept, what I was doing. So going through this tough time, spending now all this, I was in real estate in the past. So everything I was making in real estate, I was just pumping into these businesses. And so just going through these ups and downs and all over the places with entrepreneurship, finally just hitting this space of like, I need to just chill out. It was almost like, that rebound from a relationship, but I was going from business to business to try
Mm.
to, like fill that void of whatever was happening. And so I just remember sitting on my floor in my apartment, and I've been hearing about this breath work thing. I've been doing some meditations and all this. So I'm hearing about this breath work. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. It was a 40-minute breath work on YouTube, by Soma Breath. This gentleman, Niraj, he worked very closely with Wim Hof. And I was like, okay, let's see what this is all about. And I had just a crazy psychedelic experience,
Mm.
completely sober, crazy psychedelic experience. I'm like, what the hell was that? Like,
Was it
what?
like holotropic breathing
It
kind of?
was basically the style that we use in soul expansion right now, the
Mm.
style that Othership uses, the style that elemental rhythm is kind of like the birth of that as well. So it's breathing to the beat. It's yeah, different cadences, 4 count breaths, 2 count breaths, single count breaths,
Mhm.
and then pairing that with some breath holds as well. So it allows you to shut down that prefrontal cortex and access the subconscious mind,
Mm.
and just find this like level of stillness that maybe you can't get with meditation. So it was really powerful for me. I just had this aha moment. I need to share this with the world, as many people that want to experience this. And at the time, I had this very, I don't want to say narrow mindset, but like this idea that I wanted to help athletes transition from the game. So how can they, like, who are you beyond what you do, essentially? And I was going through that as a former athlete,
Mm.
just trying to figure out my own shit and what that looked like. So I was like, oh man, maybe this breath work can do that. So I was like, I got to get, certified, go through this whole thing. So I jumped in right away, just like fully immersed myself in it. And while I was doing that, Othership opened up, and it was right across. So my former partner and I, Stella, we were going to this place called Home, which is right across the street from, now it's Trove, but it was Home, this meditation clinic. So we were going there, and again, COVID on and off, open and close kind of vibe. And we look across the street and we see this thing like Othership. We're like, what the hell is this? And she's like, we got to go. And this was like February at this point, and it was around Valentine's Day. And she's like, let's go. I think they were open for maybe 2 weeks at this point. They had opened officially at the
Wow.
beginning of February. And I'm like, no, not doing that. What the fuck? I had to do ice baths and hockey. I'm like, I'm not doing that. There's no way. She's like, no, we got to go. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. So we go, and we just both have this like magical experience there. It's so beautiful. Harry and Amanda were leading the first session there. It was a couples class, so like just this intentional like eye gazing, and a little bit of the breath, and like all of these things that we were starting to get into. So we're like, oh, this is amazing. And so she's like, I have to get involved. Like, I want to work here. Like, she went in the next day. They like basically hired her on the spot. It was like boom, boom, boom. And then for me, I was like, oh, I'll just keep coming and whatever. I'll just, enjoy this space because it's beautiful, and I love the people here, and it's so cool. And they're like, well, why don't you teach a class with Stella? You can teach the couples class. And I was like, nah, I don't know. I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I got so much going on, and really I had nothing going on. So it's like, I'm like, okay,
It's like the sense of ego or pride,
totally. It
right?
was
To try
so
something
ego,
new.
so ego. This whole
Mm.
process that I've been going through since that moment has been this surrender into, like, even just like that was my first job,
Mm.
really. Like, I like realistically, like, real estate, you kind of an entrepreneur, you're kind of doing your own thing. Wasn't really working for anybody there, so it was like my first, like, okay, I'm gonna just surrender into whatever this is. And so I started teaching the couples class with Stella there, and it was just such a beautiful experience, and it was so great, and we were bonding together, and it was just like this magical experience. And so I was like, like, I think I could teach my own class. That'd be kind of cool. Like, what if I now all this breathwork stuff that I'm doing, I can like integrate it into here. And I brought them this idea. I was like, hey, like I would love to teach a class called the Mindful Athlete. It would be like some stretching in there, some breath work. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, go, like, it was very like collaborative in the beginning and trying to like figure out like what is this? Let's sort it out. And so they were super receptive to it, and then I showed them it and they're like, yeah, let's do it. So that was my first class. It was called the Mindful Athlete, and I loved it. It was just like I got so excited every week to go in. I was doing Wednesdays in the morning, and then eventually it was Saturday mornings, and I was just so excited. I'm like, okay, this is it. And then I started getting more into like the actual breath work, the longer form breath work classes and stuff like that. And they had invited me to one of their sessions, Othership. So Harry and Amanda were leading this beautiful breathwork experience. So I went there and I'm like, oh my God, this is like very similar to what I've been learning. This like so aligned, it's synergy. Like, holy shit, this is the universe telling me this is it. This is what I gotta be doing. So I see them and I see Harry pull out the guitar. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is exactly it. This is
Mm.
so beautiful. And so from there, it was just kind of this like aha moment, like, okay, I want to start creating these events. And at the time, I'd gone to them. I said, hey, like, how can I run some events for Othership and do these types of experiences? And they were very focused on the in-person, obviously the sauna ice bath at the time. So like, we're just going to focus on this. And I said, okay, no problem. I'm going to focus on my events and see what that looks like. And it started just being called Expansion, and then we had different themes attached to it and stuff like that. And then as it started to grow, we had like 20 people in a little yoga studio, 30 people, 50, 80, like just started to grow and grow. And we found these beautiful venues up until what it is today, 170 people every month at the Illuminarium over there. And now we're trying different venues out and really trying to see what we can accomplish there. But so yeah, so that was kind of the evolution of it. And then it just started with the two of us, Stella and I, just doing like with backing tracks. Then I brought in my friend that was a guitar player. Then we started playing music. Then another musician, one after another, and all of my friends started just coming in to create this beautiful band that we have today. Yeah, we have like incredible musicians. Dante, just a jack of all trades. He does a little bit of everything. He's mostly on the kit. Then we have like Aaron on bass, Zach on violin. John Luca is just this phenomenal guitar player that can play absolutely everything. My friend Chris Weatherstone, just like crazy horns player, plays the sax and amazing stuff. And then Arkaya, just beautiful vocals. So we added that element to go deep on the sound. And it's just been this beautiful evolution of what we're creating, and like a labor of love of everybody just pitching in and trying to create this experience. And we see when you're there and you're in it, you see like the amount of people there, you see the quality of the venue, you're like, whoa, this could be something, this could be it. And had to last year was so overwhelming because like you're like, it's here, it's like we got it. And 7 months of just back to back to back, you start to fall into this burnout. You start to lose yourself in different other areas of life where I wasn't showing up fully. I wasn't showing up for Stella, my partner at the time. I wasn't showing up for my family. All of these things that just led to major burnout for me towards the end of the year. And just coming out of that now, actually, like in the last couple months, just starting to really um, find out what that was and why that happened. And just I wasn't filling up my cup enough so that I could pour into these other areas in
Mhm.
other buckets of my life, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many intriguing anchor points in your journey. I want to zero in on one such point. You mentioned this approach to this first job, right?
Yeah.
This what I observe as like this intuitive leap, which I feel when it comes to doing entrepreneurial activities or anything where you're trying to go out into the world and create something, there's very much we're not really taught as much about the intuitive side, right?
Yeah.
It takes, and I'm learning this personally with my own, like, what is intuition, like how does it work, like how do you lean and surrender into this feeling? So what was going through your mind when you had that experience where you felt a pull of sorts,
hmm
and what was the internal dialogue that you went
hmm
through to then trust enough to follow that direction for yourself?
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of resistance at the beginning because it was like I'm an entrepreneur. I don't want to work for anybody else. Like that's just not who I am. And so it was like this, like, am I going backwards by taking a role here? And there's something special in that surrender into leaning into what you feel is the bigger picture, right? And being a part of something bigger than yourself. And that's what Othership was for me. It was like this, like, surrender into something that is clearly bigger than myself. And can I just be a piece of this grand vision of what's happening here, as opposed to it's all about Freddie, it's all about me. Like, I want to make everything about, like, for me, right? So it was, how can I contribute? And I think that that was such a big mindset shift for me. And there was many times where that other ego was coming out and just being like, what are you doing here? Like, go do your own thing, go do this. And then ultimately, like, that's the birth of soul expansion, because I do have that entrepreneur nature, but it didn't come from a place of like, this has to be mine and I have to do this. And I, like, all of those things that I had in the past. So to your question about like what was going on in my head, it was a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of like, do I do this? Do I do that? And I think the main thing was finding the stillness so that I could find the answers a little bit easier. And, sometimes it was super clear, and then sometimes it wasn't as clear. So you have to, like, kind of take a couple steps until, okay, I'll do it until this, I'll do it until that. And then just recently, I taught my last class there a couple months ago, and there were that it was an intel moment, and then just understanding that, okay, this is the end of this chapter, and being okay with that. And there's obviously, I miss it a lot, and I miss the community there and all that. And I always, go back and kind of touch base. But it was, yeah, it was until this moment. And I think having that in my head allowed me to take that big leap. Was like, okay, this, I'm going to give it this real go until something like this happens. So
Hmm.
yeah.
It reminds me so much of this documentary called, I think it was The Last Shaman or something like that. It was
Mm,
this gentleman who was viscerally depressed,
mm,
and he decides he needs to go to Peru in order to start working with, I guess, some of the shamans and the medicine in order to help cure his depression. And at the end of the movie, there's a beautiful point. I'm going to ruin this. Sorry, everybody. But there's this beautiful point that he says where, because he comes out of this and he essentially had to engage with the practices and kind of come to his own realizations. But he had this beautiful point, which is, I'm not here to become anything. I'm here to be a very small part of something much bigger than myself,
mm.
which was tremendously like fascinating because, as you mentioned, with I suppose the entrepreneurial mindset, it is this at the start it does kind of feel as though you're like, this thing, I'm making this thing because I wanted it. But then slowly, maybe it's like through the erosion of the waves of the world, you come to this place of trying to figure out service. Like, how can I
Mm,
show up in a way that's useful
yeah.
for the world and that the world needs, which is hard,
Yeah.
like very hard because of the creative aspect, the vanity, the
Yeah.
egotism that is involved with entrepreneurship.
Totally. And just like the nature of, like, I have to eat, like, I have to
Mhm.
make some money off of this so that we can, like, be able to survive, especially
Mhm.
downtown Toronto. It's like,
Mhm.
but for me, it's like, I just want to create, so I just want to give and I want to serve. So finding that balance and like, okay, how is this profitable, but also, where so many different points, like where my gifts and my purpose intersect, and then how can I be of service, and then how can I make a living, right?
Mhm.
And if all of that can come under one roof, which is a big ask, but possible, very possible, that's the that's the secret, I
That's the
guess.
winning. That's
Like,
the
that's
winning
it,
ticket.
man. That's all I want to do. That's I just want to give, and I want to give from the heart, and I want to do it in a way that my gifts and what I love to do are at the forefront of that. And from what I can tell through soul expansion, it feels like that's it. So I want to keep doing it. And
Mhm.
um, the impact is something that I can't ignore. What's been happening and some of the feedback that we get, and the people that keep showing up for it. It's really beautiful. So I want to just keep doing that. Yeah, I
And
think I answered your
and
question.
so,
I don't know.
well, it's intriguing because there is so much of these modalities of, whether it's meditation or, talk therapy or any of these things where you're coming to an understanding of oneself, but there is a value in these like physical practices too, right,
Hmm.
where you're doing like yoga or even just exercise. I often feel some of the biggest one of the big if I was to come up with like a list of like how do you continue to expand, not that I have the answer, but I often feel like a lot of people's journeys start with exercise, like getting
Yep.
to the gym, and then that's like the first connection they have with their body. And then there's something about that that catalyzes this process of
Yes.
introspection, personal growth. And so with soul expansions, you add this element of like breath work,
Hmm.
which is I found fascinating because I had quite a long time ago this idea of like I called musical breathing, where I
Hmm.
like practiced breathing to like the rhythm of like classical music or something like that.
Yes.
And it was a like astoundingly fascinating experience.
Hmm.
It brought this physical level to listening to music, which might otherwise just be like, I'm trying to think of like a Mozart tune that I can
Yeah.
hum or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But that physical embodiment then I guess allows you to connect with more of that physical side of these practices.
Totally. Yeah. So any direction that you take in terms of like fitness or wellness in general, right? The ultimate what you're really trying to do is regulate your nervous system. Like even with an actual workout, like obviously you're getting this pump but what it's doing is it's regulating your nervous system. So that's why I think there's so many beautiful outcomes that come from having a good solid routine, whether it is breath work, meditation, going for runs, your whatever workout you're doing, Pilates, this, that, all of these things eventually get you in a state where you're regulating your nervous system and you're having to breathe. You're having to actually, when you are running, you have to breathe. You have to continue that rhythm, right? So that's ultimately it. And on a scientific level, essentially what you're doing is, you're regulating the parasympathetic and the sympathetic state, right? Parasympathetic, rest and digest, more of that chill state. Sympathetic is more of that energizing, quick breathing, more of what you're doing in a workout session, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things, when you balance them out, create this harmonious state, right? And you're bringing yourself into this harmonious state so that you can then bring yourself into emotional regulation. You can regulate your emotions. You can deal with some of the crap that comes at you inevitably. Like no matter what state we're in our lives, something's going to get thrown at us, and it's how we react to that. So when we have a balanced nervous system and a regulated state, we're able to show up fully. And when that's not the case, then that's kind of where some of our negative loops start back, some of our patterns, some of our default states. And a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself specifically, default state is like melancholy, it's sadness, it's depression. It's just because we know it so well, right? And it's easy to go back to that. So with a regulated nervous system, maybe our default state isn't that. It's actually light and playful and joyful. And we come back to that true essence of who we are, like deep within our soul. And yeah, I hope that answered that
Mm-hmm.
question. I was going to go off on a crazy tangent on ayahuasca right now, but I'll save that for another episode, maybe. But yeah.
Well, you're right though in that
Mhm,
sense that the default state, like I always like I think back to, for example, like happiness anchors or happiness levels as anchors in our psychology. And
mhm.
you're right that if we can, and I feel like maybe this is where meditation gives us the practice to have the ability to observe that as a phenomenon rather than of the entity itself,
Totally.
to see then, okay, well, this is a state, and maybe that state's malleable. Like maybe I don't need to always be that, and that's where you, I guess, challenge those narratives and that I guess process,
Yeah.
right? And then you can move into that more playful or more sense of state. Because at least in my own personal experience, I know that if I don't work out for 2 or 3 days, I am miserable and I'm
Yeah.
just irritable and I'm not, because again, maybe it's that emotional regulation plus the nervous system regulation that you
Yes.
mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned something there about the narrative, and that's something that we really drive home a lot, especially at Soul Expansion, but just in general. It's like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? We're always telling ourselves a story. We're always giving ourselves rationale and reasoning on an unconscious level. And when we are able to reprogram that, and it's not easy, it's actually one of the hardest things to do, but there's a method and there's like methodology behind being able to reprogram that. Um, it just allows you to open up a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
and to be a little bit more clear as to why you're telling yourselves those stories, and then recorrecting those stories and just getting back to a space of like, what's the new story that I want to tell?
Mm-hmm.
What's that story that I'm telling myself about my future, or about who I am currently, or about who I was in the past? And that's a big one. Like, we do a lot of inner child work, a lot of stuff on reprogramming for the future,
Mhm.
basically changing those stories
In the soul, so like
in
during,
soul expansion. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So can you talk about that? So are
yeah.
you, because in some sense you mentioned it's a concert, right? So
Hmm.
you said that there's original music, so all the musicians are creating
Hmm.
their own original music, and then you're adding breathwork, I suppose, segments into the mix, and then are you doing some of these more guided meditations and?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll give you kind of like an overview of how the event rolls. So we, like I mentioned, we have that opening space where everybody kind of mingles and meets, and kind of like a concert experience. And then you come into the main space, and we start with like a grounding meditation, just get everybody in there. I start with my story, so just tell kind of how I got to where we're at, and then from there we go into lessons in breath. So just how can you get the most out of the breathwork experience, how to breathe, where to like hold it, how to hold it,
Mhm.
and then go through some sequencing around some of the typical like pranayama techniques, just to show them some of the science behind it. And then from there we actually go into some vocal toning. So there's something incredibly powerful that happens when everybody sings together. You bring your heart and your mind and your bodies into a cohesive pattern, a cohesive rhythm. And you think about like traditional religion and why there's like chants and ohms and
Hymns, yeah.
hymns and all of these things, right? Um, so we do that in a very modern way, in a very inclusive way, and definitely not in a religious way, but more in the like this idea of community and yeah, a cohesive rhythm, right?
Mhm.
Because I believe that we're all in concert with each other, and when you listen and when you slowly like slow down, you hear the rhythm of the world around you, and you hear the sequencing of the people. And sometimes when you're out of rhythm, you can feel that as well, right? You're just like things are not hitting right now, something's out of rhythm, and you're out of concert with yourself, you're out of concert with the world around you. So
Mhm.
anyways, that was a tangent, but so we go into uh, this like group singing, and then from there, that's when we get into the breath work sequence. So the breath work runs from anywhere from 30 minutes to 40 minutes, depending on the vibe, depending on the crew. And like it's all kind of, we have kind of a structure of the themes and what we're going to do. But uh, basically, it's kind of feeling off the energy in the
Mhm.
room and what's happening there at the time. Usually, some programming around future self, past self, like inner child work, and then like just being super honest with who you are. And just recently, I had a beautiful experience at a place called Rhythmia, which is this ayahuasca retreat center, and they had these beautiful kind of guiding posts, and one of them was "Show me who I've become." And the other one was um, merge me back with my soul. So they say anywhere between years 1 and 7 years old, we lose the essence of who we are as a child, and like who
Mm.
that original soul is that came into this world. And it could be like as small as a little small incident that happened, or large trauma, right? And there's no like trauma
Various
gauging, right?
grades, yeah.
Yeah, it's just when you're 1 to 7 years old, trauma's trauma. It is
Mhm.
what it is. So that there's that, and then the third one is heal my heart. So obviously, that one's pretty straightforward. So within some of the programming that we've done, especially recently, kind of integrate some of those lessons and those learnings from Jerry Powell there that just had like these beautiful impact on my life.
Mhm.
So usually I integrate something that I'm learning, I'm going through in my experiences in the real world, and
Mhm.
I try to tie that into whatever the meditations are.
Mhm.
So similar to the way Othership does it in some of their breath work on the breathwork app as well. We do like sequencing breathing, like elemental rhythm, which is like 4 counts, 2 counts, single counts, really get into it. And then we have like it's basically like a journey. It's a story that I tell throughout the whole breathwork experience. So
Mhm.
there
Like a personal story, or like
um,
a
more of like a journey of the actual guests themselves, like where
oh,
they're going and
yeah.
how they're being taken through the experience. So it starts with like sometimes we do. talk about going through like a mystical forest, and like the forest
Oh,
is
okay. Yeah.
a replication of like their life, and like how what's growing in their life right now, and then they can kind of like move through this forest and can go through another one. We had like a desert theme where we're like walking through the desert, and they're meeting ancestors from the past, and like they're sitting around a fire, and
Hmm.
some of all of these things that little tidbits that I've learned from different meditations and different beautiful practitioners that have helped, and then putting my own spin on it, and then
Hmm.
using my own stories and my own even psychedelic experiences that have come up, and intertwining that into the experience. So you kind of, the idea is to go on like this hero journey where you start feeling one way and then you finish feeling another way, and there's like an arc and an up and a down and all over the place, and the music is associated with that as well.
Hmm.
So kind of gives you this like Cirque du Soleil art form of like the experience that you're going through. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's a whole kind of run through there. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, Jung had this, Carl Jung, the psychologist, he had
Hmm.
this idea called active imagination,
Hmm.
which is often prevalent, I suppose, in different meditation themes or stories, is the word that you're using. And the idea is that through the conscious working with our unconscious or integration of that we can sort of attune, but the unconscious speaks in it speaks in image, it speaks in, well, music, it's very, it has an affinity towards the arts, we can say that.
Hmm.
So it's intriguing to me that this element of imaginative themes become so important in this experience, and it sounds like you're in some ways prompting like this imagination experience, this active imagination
Yeah.
dialogue, if you will, with oneself.
Yeah. So the whole idea is helping the individual get out of their own way. And we use that through, or we do that through music and storytelling, right?
Hmm.
So every every individual that comes through already has the answers. That we're not giving them anything. We're not saying, "Hey, this is I'm your shaman. This is how it goes." Like, no, it's everybody's got their own answers that they've been holding on to, and it's just layered under maybe guilt, shame, fear, some of these emotions that are just like layering on top of what it is that they're actually looking for. And for me, what I'm trying to do is try to allow them to have the stillness, find the stillness within themselves, so that they can eventually unravel that for themselves.
Hmm.
And then with this storytelling, it allows them to get out of their active mind, right? Where they're thinking about their grocery list when
Hmm.
they're in the middle of a meditation, or they're thinking about whatever, right? So that's the idea, is like get into this level of just a deep trance almost,
Hmm.
so that the answers can come through like a dreamlike state, right? When you have these dreams that are happening and these messages coming through, how can you process them and articulate them in a way where you can then apply them? And then there's the integration, right? Like, what do you do after you have these answers, right? Like,
What do you do after you have like an answer that you get
yeah,
from a situation?
yeah. So for me personally, I look for signs of it in my day to day. And I do a lot of journaling just to like, kind of like keep track of what's happening. So for instance, I'll just use like the ayahuasca experience. So I had so many beautiful downloads there, but one of the big ones for me was like the being in concert with the world, and just like hearing these little, like, what the medicine was telling me, like, are you listening now? Are you listening to what's happening here? And this just beautiful collaboration of nature, of sound, of community, of connection. Are you listening? And I'm just getting chills thinking about it, because like that to me was like, okay, how do you integrate that, right? It's constantly remembering and constantly just trying to be in the present moment when things like when things are don't feel like they should be in the present moment, right? When you feel like you're trying to think ahead or think in the past, how do you come back to that? So just like applying these little triggers in my own mind, and these little things that when I do start to like get a little chaotic in my energy, how do I come back to that? So like for me, using obviously like breath work, meditation, stuff like that, but doing physical stuff because my background is in athletics. I played hockey my whole life, so I have to be physical. I have to be working out, and so little things like that. When I start to feel these like triggers hit, then going back and just regrounding and recentering. So
Mhm.
yeah, I hope that made
So,
sense. Yeah,
well, I guess I want to kind of delineate something that I guess I'm
yeah,
seeing, which is that it sounds like integration isn't an idea that you have this amazing revelation. Let's say you do you go through this meditation, right? Meditation
hmm
experience, and you have this revelation to yourself that, oh, maybe I'm not being there for myself enough.
hmm
It's not necessarily that that point in time after is like, boom, it's integrated, I'm ready to go.
Oh,
Like
definitely not.
it's
Yeah,
it's like it's a practice
yeah,
of like saying, okay, this idea that I've identified, how can I show up for this idea in my life many times?
yeah.
And I suppose what you're saying is through these modalities or ritualistic practices of breathwork, meditation,
Mhm.
exercise, community, that's your way of continuing to kind of maintain that awareness and keep that idea around.
Yeah, yeah, and I truly believe that that loop will continue, that negative loop, until you correct it. So it'll keep coming back in different lessons in your life until you address it and walk through it.
Yeah.
And some of them are very uncomfortable
Do
to
you
walk
think
through
any
that.
of those things stick though? Like I think that's one thing I worry about is that you might, for example, you might have a couple months where you're like, you come around positive thinking now, I'm positive thinking now.
Yeah, yeah,
And then for some reason it falls off, it
yeah.
falls away. Do you think that there is a way that we can permanently
hmm
integrate some of those things? Or is that the price? Is it like eternal vigilance is
Yeah.
the price?
Yeah, yeah, I think that is it too. And I think people learn in different ways, right? They either learn when they gain something or they learn when they lose something.
Mm,
And when that happens, you really find out, did I learn my lesson, right? And then, yeah, learning how you learn,
mhm,
right? And that comes like with experience and actually going through it, right? And be like, oh man, I had to actually lose something really intense in order to learn this lesson and to actually apply change. And the change, to create change for me,
mhm,
hardest thing ever. Like that's not it's not easy. It's not like I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm fixed and whatever. I've done a breath work a couple times and I'm good.
mhm,
You know, it's this constant level of vigilance, exactly what you're saying. And then also, but I think that's the game, right? It's like y- you you handle your energy so that you can create this balanced level of state so that you have the full potency and vitality to show up, to continue to learn and push past those levels of resistance that are holding you back from change. Because the reason we retreat is because we lose the energy, we lose the focus, we lose that vitality, the potency to show up, especially as men, right? Like
mhm,
there's so much being asked of us in so many different areas to show up fully. And it's an honor, actually. And I used to see it as like, oh man, like I have to do all this, why aren't they doing what, why my partner, why isn't she doing this, why is it?
mhm,
But it's actually an honor as the man to be able to show up in all of these areas. And it's a responsibility for us to handle our energy so that we can show up in all of these areas fully with full potency.
mhm.
So,
And in some ways,
yeah.
maybe it's also because again, I always just think back to like the contemporary narrative, which I struggle with myself, which is you know working more, working harder, burning yourself out, right?
Mhm.
And it's just to highlight what you said there, which is like managing your energy. It is having that practice or ritual, whether it's going to the gym, right? And like yeah, maybe there is a lot of work to do on this particular project, but also kind of filling the cup up in that way because that small hour or so that you focus on doing the gym kind of yields returns
Totally.
in that. But it's hard sometimes to come to that balance because it does feel salient to say, why don't I just keep doing this? Because also maybe that's the story that I'm telling myself.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's the story, man. It's the story because we know deep down, we know what the answers are. We know what we would have to do to have a fully energetic, vital life. And why don't we do those things? And
Mhm.
there's a lot of like self-sabotaging tendency that come in. For me, the self-sabotaging came in with like partying and just feeling
Mm,
like this level of like I wanna party to feel good about myself, to feel like I'm being seen, to feel like other people see me and I'm out and I'm getting this validation of
Mhm.
walking through a bar or a nightclub or whatever, and people say, "Hey, Freddie, like great to see you." Like there's just like this outside
Community
validation,
too.
community, yeah, and there's a level of community in that, of course, but if it's not being used in a productive way, and what I mean by productive is like having that sense of community first, but it's more this self-indulgent feeling of like I
Mm.
got to do this all the time so I feel good.
Mhm.
That's where I was like I got to do this all the time so I feel good. And I also come from like my background was like I partied quite a bit, and I when I went to school in Boston, I was around some very influential people in the city, some of the most prominent athletes in the city at the time, some artists, collectives there, and one of my best friends had just won the Stanley Cup
Wow.
with the Boston Bruins. So I was I was riding pretty high at this time,
Yeah.
and I had just started playing the guitar at this time too. So I was like playing, at these after parties, and I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible, but I was the
I
only
mean,
one
you
that.
landed the after party, so.
So yeah, but it was something else, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, so just stop me.
No.
Okay, so I'm playing at these after parties, and my buddy had invited like all of these amazing people, like these really prominent musicians and different people that were in there. And this rapper comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, like I want you to play on one of my songs." And I was like, I don't know, at this point I'd been playing the guitar for maybe 3 months, 4 months. I'm
Wow.
like I could barely play four chords. I was playing like Johnny Cash, like Folsom Prison Blues. Like I'm like, do you want that on your side? I doubt you want that. And he's like, no, 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 you're gonna play. And then my friend was a big fan of this guy. He's like a well-known Boston rapper at the time, and just an awesome dude. And we still connect to this day. But so he's like, okay, come to the studio. Like it's in a week, and come through. So I'm spending the week like, how do I learn the guitar in a week? Like how can I figure this out? So I'm nervous. I'm freaking out. And my buddy's like, my hockey buddy's coming with me. He's like, all right, let's go. We're gonna do this. And so we pull up. It's this little shithole studio in like Reading, Mass. I'm like, oh my god, what's gonna happen here? Like I have no idea. And we pull up, and like my buddy's in this fancy car, and it's just a scene like we're like, oh, am I doing this? Like I guess I'm doing this. So we're like, okay, we go in, and the place is jammed. He's got all of his friends there. It's like a party scene. It's
Mm.
like everybody's just kind of like vibing, and nobody's really paying attention to me. So I'm like kind of off in the corner, just kind of doing my own thing. I'm like, hopefully he forgets that I'm here. Like he forgets that I'm here to do any of this stuff, right? So
Just because of the fear you
the
felt?
fear, yeah. So I'm like drinking, I'm smoking, like cannabis, and I'm just like, all right, I just need to like lose myself in this a little bit.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, he comes over, music stops, and he goes, "Okay, Freddie, like, what do you got?"
Wow.
And everybody's just looking at me. I'm just like, my knees going like this. I'm fucking shaking, absolutely shaking. I'm like, I guess it falls in prison blues. So like, okay. So I just start doing this thing on the four chords that I know, like ba 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 ba, and I kind of like blacked out. Like I don't even
Mm.
remember what the hell happened. And all of a sudden, it's like quiet, and he goes, "Oh, track it right now." I'm like, fuck, thank God I have nothing else. I actually have nothing else. So I go back into like the recording area, first time in a recording booth, first time like I'm even in a recording studio at all.
Mhm.
And the producer, Lewis Bell, now he's just a gem of a human, and like the fact that he even like allowed me to do this was amazing. So we're just like shooting the shit, and I spend the next like 40 minutes in there just trying to figure out what I just did, because I had no idea what I just did out there. So
Mhm.
he was
Mhm.
super patient with me, super kind, and we're just like vibing and finally get it down and like whatever. And he's like, "Hey man, like if you ever have any of your own songs when I'm not working, come in and we'll do some stuff." I'm like, "Oh man, thank you so much. Like
Mhm.
that sounds amazing." And I had been writing some of my own songs, even though I'd just been playing for a little bit. Things were just kind of coming through. So I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this would be really cool." Fast forward a couple weeks, Boston Marathon bombing happens.
Oh
So
wow.
we were right there on Newbury Street, just like a street over from Boylston where it happened. The first bomb went off. We were kind of like, oh, okay, what something's going on, construction, whatever. Second one was basically like half a block from where we were. We were right in a back alley, so we heard like everything. And I still get chills like thinking about it right now, because it was just this moment of like you're drunk, you're partying, everybody's loud, to stillness, quiet, and
Mm.
just fear. Like the fear, it was like you can cut the fear with a knife there. It was just insane. And now we're all being like escorted out, and nobody's joking, nobody's like
Mm.
laughing, or at least like in our group, we were like, what the hell? So we all go back to our place, and my buddy that was playing on the Bruins, I lived with him at the time, so we'd all go back there, and and we were just sitting in there, and now it's like kind of lockdown mode, because these
Safety, yeah.
yeah, these kids, we didn't know they were kids at the time, but they were at large, they were running around, and so for the next 3 days we're in like this lockdown mode.
Mhm.
And I'm just sitting there watching the news, and I start just like writing this song, and it was called Boston Strong, and it was about the families that were affected, the kids that lost their lives, and all of these things. And yeah, it was really intense. And so I showed Alu the song, and he said, "Yeah, let's record it." And at the time, it was like $1 a song on iTunes, right? So it's like, just throw this up here, and whatever we make, we're just gonna give it to the families that were affected. And my buddy tweeted it out, and we got a bunch of people like purchasing it, and it was just a really cool feeling.
Mhm.
And just went around and passed the checks out to Spalding Hospital there, and we just did this. And it was the first time in my life where I was like, oh shit, music can like actually affect people,
Mhm.
and be this some sort of support, and on some level. So I didn't really see it like that before, because I was in hockey my whole life, so it
Mhm.
wasn't I'd never played music before this, and I was around 23 at the time, 24, something like that.
Mhm.
So then from there, Lou was like, "Hey, let's do another song," and we ended up doing 4 other songs, and one of them was my friend. I don't know if we get into this one, but my friend had was getting in some trouble with the Bruins, because we were partying quite a bit, and so we ended up, we're like, we're gonna go to Cape Cod for the weekend, and we're just gonna like stay up here, and just stay out of the press, and nothing's gonna, you can't get in trouble out here.
Mhm.
So we have like 15 of us, and we're just at this place, and my buddy brings up the camera, because we're gonna do like a video for my song called Summer Nights. It's supposed to be this like love song, like summer nights, super chill. And so within the first hour, we look around, we're like, where the fuck's Todd? We're like, where'd he go? And nobody knows where he is. So we're like, okay, he's probably just like getting some drinks or whatever. Comes back in, he's like, hey, everybody, like sit around the table there. I got to tell you something. Like, I just got traded, and just wanted you guys to be the first to know, and
Mhm.
whatever. So we're sitting there, and and so I'm like, fuck, like I thought I was gonna live in Boston the rest of my life. Like, on a
Mhm.
selfish level, I'm like, this sucks. Like, I'm like, fucking Dallas, like, I don't know, their jerseys suck, like, all this stuff. So anyways, so I'm like, I'm just sitting there, and he looks over at me, and he goes, invite everybody you fucking know. I was like, okay. So within the next like 4 or 5 hours, we had
Mhm.
like Project X style
Oh, wow.
party at this like Cape Cod place. We're shooting like this music video for my song. So it was one of the craziest experiences I've ever had in my life. And
Mhm.
it was such a such an amazing night,
Mhm.
2 nights back to back. And so we filmed this whole thing. We released the music video, and then Barstool at the time picks it up, and they're
Mm.
like, "Oh, this is like a trade party video," and like this whole thing, and it like ended up getting like a bunch of views on YouTube overnight, and
Mhm.
people wanted me to play it at like these bars and stuff like that, and
Wow.
it ended up just like taking on a life of its own. And they were playing it at like in my like cafeteria at my school, and like
Mhm.
it was a whole thing. So I started to get a little scared. I was like, what the hell, like
Mm.
am I a musician? Like I don't know. Like I thought I was gonna be a hockey player, all of these things. And then I got asked to play at this bar, so it was my first time like playing live, and I'm like so nervous. And I shit the bed. It was so bad. It was so bad. And thankfully, I had like a backing track, but it was just so bad. And I was so mad at myself, and I was
Mm.
just so down. And I'm just getting so drunk that night, and just like trying to forget about it. And basically, like I'm never gonna play again. Like, I'm never gonna play live again. I'm just unless I practice a lot, and I become good. I'm just never gonna do this again.
Mhm.
And then I just stopped. I just completely stopped playing in front of people. And I ended up going and take like some vocal lessons. with this poor girl. She she helped me out so much. Her name is Simone. Just like just a beautiful person, and her mom, like they were so sweet. I would do these lessons in her living room, and mom would be cooking dinner, and I'd be like just screaming like a cat in the other room, just like I'm like yeah, so bad. It was so bad, but she stuck with me, and it eventually started sounding a little bit better, and like I'm definitely no, yeah, Celine Dion now, but at least I can hit a note. But it's all thanks to her and that whole process of, yeah, just leaning into the fear of like, super vulnerable, like,
Mhm.
doing that at somebody else's house.
But at the same time, it's interesting because I suppose you mentioned like this. I mean, it sounds like you initially came into this scene because you had that world where it was the validation was coming because people knew you in that world,
Yeah,
and then you were almost curating your own identity, like this kind of authentic expression, the art. If we were to use archetypes, right, the artist archetype, right, where
totally.
you were practicing guitar and then you sort of leaned more into that. But then you also mentioned that any of the, what would you say, like, not failures but disappointments that
Yeah,
you experienced, then you had sort of that same community that would kind of numb you a little bit,
yeah,
because it's difficult to stomach those experiences of disappointment
yeah,
or failure or what have you. um, so it's intriguing then that you curated this identity and then you sort of, I suppose, had an experience where you decided this wasn't for me anymore, this kind of scene.
yeah.
So it's intriguing because I feel as though in a lot of our lives we have these authentic, what would you say, paths,
Mm.
right, that we kind of kindle, but they can sometimes be smothered in the environments that we find ourselves in,
Hmm.
depending on whether the environment's conducive or not. Like there was this study that found, I think, depending on like somebody's personality and temperament, they actually do better outside of their own home country because
Mm.
maybe, for example, if they are like in a country that doesn't appreciate like achievement in business or something like that, and maybe is more of doctors and lawyers and more step paths, they might actually do well as a transplant in a different country, right?
Mm.
So drawing that same metaphor to the ideas of communities, where in one community, maybe like I can imagine that like showing up and thinking about things like, oh, like I care about my health or like I want to do yoga in the morning. That wouldn't be conducive if you were up all night doing,
Totally,
partying and things like that. So
totally.
it kind of, I suppose, chronicalizes the experience that you had in your own development where you're seeing, okay, maybe this community isn't right for me
Yeah,
anymore. Maybe this isn't. And so that's how you then found yourself on this path where you're
totally.
focusing more on the integration. And so you're taking these things and bringing them into soul expansions
Yeah.
to help other people, I suppose, find their own path.
Yeah, yeah. The idea is like to be like, if that guy can do it, like I can do it. That's the whole thing, right? Is like find your own version of like this self actualization, this
Mhm.
self realization of who you can become, and you know, uh, being really brutally honest with yourself in
Mhm.
that process of like, what do I really want, and why do I really want it, and yeah, through soul expansion and through the modalities, I believe that you can get there, and it's not an overnight thing.
Mhm.
There might be some unlocks that happen right away for sure, but more likely it's going to be this process and these small choices, brick by brick,
Mhm.
to lead into what you want to become. And
And I think a
mhm.
lot of these practices, they like, I want to use the word that's coming to me is like courageous, right? Because I
Mm,
do think it requires a certain level of courage to try and experiment with even like breath work.
yeah,
Like even when you start, you're like, what is this? Because I sometimes I feel like I live in the consciousness of a high school, where I'm like, oh, that's not cool,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But it's kind of tiptoeing into that fear a little bit, that resistance, and saying like, let me, this is new,
yeah,
it's different, it's kind of scary, and I don't know what people are going to think of me, but like, let me
yeah.
try this, let me see if doing breath work like can help, or maybe meditation can, help me find more of that path.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's two things that came up for me there. It's like one, when you think about like your full expression, your authentic expression, it's finding this level of like almost like delusional confidence within
Mm.
you that allows you to express it and be out there. And I say that in such a like an endearing term of like this delusional confidence, but like that's what you need. You need this like this fire, like I'm doing this, I'm almost on like this conveyor belt that's taking me on this path
Mm.
towards who I'm becoming, and getting off the conveyor belt path of like where I was going that was totally in an opposite direction. So you need this like level of like strength and
Mm.
you know, courage to go and jump on this new path, and then to feel that this is it, to have that courage, and or sorry, have that confidence to really embrace that. So there's that, and then also like just to try something like breath work and meditation to get there. You have to come to terms with surrendering into what's going to come up, right? Because
Mm.
that's really what the resistance is. It's not that, oh, I don't, maybe don't think it's cool, or this or that, or like some of the other things that might have been blockages in the past, because now it is pretty, like, not maybe
Very
not mainstream,
destigmatized,
but
yeah.
yeah, right. So now it's like pretty well known. So what I believe the holdup for a lot of people is this, like, what's going to come up for me, you know?
Yeah.
Because am I going to cry? Am I going to cry in front of people? Am I going to, you know, all of these
Yeah.
things,
The shame associated with
shame.
that.
And
Yeah.
but when you realize wherever you're doing this,
Hmm.
everybody's in it together, you
Hmm.
know, and they're actually like rooting for you.
Hmm.
Like people are, and when there is a breakthrough like that, people are applauding you. Like this is, you know, this is what you're there for, you know.
Hmm.
So it's like this sense of being held
Hmm.
in a space that you normally wouldn't get in that regard. And that's why I always encourage like group breathwork events as opposed to just doing it at home by yourself. Both beautiful, and definitely do it at home by yourself as
Hmm.
well. But the magic is in these group events where you can really surrender into like this experience together, because it's like this sense of bond, and yeah, like I said, like cohesive heart rhythm, you know, when people are all breathing together. And we have this one where it's just like hoo, ha, hoo, ha, and everybody, the whole room is shaking because everybody's doing this.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a vibration, you know, it's a frequency that you're able to attune to all together. And yeah, and release some of that judgment, and judgment for yourself, and also the other people around you, because everybody's on this path together. And if
Hmm.
you're showing up in that room, there's a good chance that you're, you know, on this like self-discovery path, that you understand what somebody else is going through. So there is no judgment around like
Yeah.
what's going to come up.
Yeah, you're right. Like when I worked with my personal coach several years ago, we had these sessions, and I recall this one session where I asked myself, you know, am I ready to open this door? Because once I open the door and you walk through, that's it, right? That's the change
Yeah,
point. And what you said there captures that beautifully, where you're like, I don't know what's going to come up. It's being open enough to your own sense of self
yeah,
to find out what could become, because maybe it destroys many parts of who you thought you were,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And even with the collective side, I find that I was reading this book called Anatomy of the Soul. I
Mhm.
cannot recall the author's name, but it talked about how our mirror neurons, right, that are both used for like empathy as well as learning and these kinds of things, it kind of explains perhaps why doing these type of work in group settings is so helpful, because not only do we see the vulnerability in others that mirrors therefore in ourselves, but also allows us to learn in that way by seeing it demonstrated in other people and then experiencing it all in one, versus say what you could look at as like the rugged individualist perspective, where you're like, I just got to do it all myself and I will get it. Like it's fascinating that that is embedded so deeply in even our like neurophysiology, that
Mhm.
we need one another in order to make and grow, because it's not, I don't know, at least in my own experience, like that's not ever how I felt. Like I always felt like I could just do things on my own, and that's still in my own journey to
Mhm.
try and untangle that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there is this level of, you know, like solo, there's an empowerment of doing things by yourself,
Hmm.
right? Like there is this level of empowerment, and then there's another strength that comes from like the power of community and the power
Hmm.
of people, knowing that people have your back. It's like this level of support that you know, I personally hadn't felt since hockey, right? It was
Hmm.
like this community, this camaraderie that you know, it's actually hard to match. Like I haven't really seen anything like it outside of sport, you know. The closest thing has been like the community that I found. Like I felt like Othership did such a great job of like bringing in all of these different communities, and then creating this like massive bubble of this like wellness community that's starting to grow, and obviously other wellness facilities throughout the City have done a great job in that as well, and just have these central points. But yeah, to your point, the strength can come from both sides. But I think when you're feeling like you're being able to like fully actualize within yourself, you can show up in that community a little bit more full, so that you're getting the most out of that community. So it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there is a necessity of solitude in
Hmm.
some sense, right? Like
Hmm.
that is where some of the, because that's where the mask or the theater of the world falls away, is when you're by yourself and you have to
Hmm.
ask yourself, those important questions. And
Hmm.
a lot of times we avoid that. We'll pick up the phone, we'll watch a movie or something like that, because sitting in stillness can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Mostly because you're like, why isn't it here yet?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Like for me, the real integration happens solo, right?
Mhm.
But the work can be done in groups,
In groups,
right?
yeah.
So you're doing the work in groups, and you can do the work by yourself as well. But the real integration and like how you're going to actually apply that is a solo journey. And it's like, who are you when no one's watching, right? Like that type of vibe.
Mhm.
That's where the integration happens the most. And you know, yeah, like coming up with your own set of values and like, consequences and some of these things that you can apply into that integration. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even just the entrepreneurial path, right? Like you said, you moved from hockey, which in many ways is a tribe, right? So and it's not hard to see how our psychology would function well in tribes, like because we as animals were very successful because of our cohesion
Mm.
as tribes, and like being able to trade off in different roles. And so then we kind of come into modernity where it's very an individual experience today, and that's the whole crisis of loneliness, the epidemic of loneliness. And it's like trying to figure it out on yourself, your own way. And then you kind of have to come to this reintegration. It's like, okay, so I have to come back to the whole, right? And figure out how to integrate in that way. But the process of entrepreneurship, at least as far as I understand it, is like, it is a very kind of lonely experience, especially as a solo founder
Totally.
versus a co-founder.
Yeah.
And I imagine that was a rickety road, right? To be like, oh, I have to, everything is on my back and I have to do it. And, you know, and then to kind of come to this place where you're like, okay, now I can be held in a community. I mean, you still are an individual, but you're held in a community that can support you.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You do feel like you're on this island as an entrepreneur, and it's me against the world type
Mm.
of experience. And I had to change that mindset because, you know, if you believe that the world is against you, it'll be against you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe that the world is conspiring to like help you, then it will help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that I was in this mindset of like, I'm a solo entrepreneur. Nobody wants to see me win. I got to
Mm-hmm.
go figure it out myself. And that's a very different mindset than I'm a solo entrepreneur. I'm working my ass off, and there are going to be people there to help guide the way as well. So you can still have this solo feeling of empowerment of
Mm-hmm.
like I'm writing my own ship kind of thing, but also that people are going to be around to support that. And I think it's just a mindset switch,
Yeah.
and in believing that that's the case. And that for me took me like at least all of last year trying to like break that down of like
Mm.
it's me versus everyone,
Yeah.
all the
Where do you
time.
think that comes from?
I think sport for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. Also, just like the culture. Like I'm Italian, so it's
Mm-hmm.
like very very competitive type of vibes in that culture. But yeah, ultimately there were experiences as well that led me to believe that, these little moments of people letting you down in different ways. And
Mm.
then you look back on like, did they let me down, or did I not manage my expectations? Did I not, communicate properly? Did I, because it's very easy for us to put the blame on others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put the blame on our parents, put the blame on the other spouse, put the blame on friends,
Mm-hmm.
put the blame on business partners, and all of these things. But ultimately, everybody in our lives is a reflection of ourselves, and in some way, shape, or form, right? It might not be exact reflection, but there's a reflection in there, and there's a reason that you're crossing paths with that person. So asking yourself, like, what about this person is bringing XYZ out of me, the good stuff, the
Mm.
bad stuff, all of these things. Um, so yeah, so just doing that dive, and not getting into this victim mentality of like, somebody let me down and like it's their fault, and now because of that I can't build my business,
Yeah.
which I fell into many times. It's like, oh, like, well, because of that I'm done, whatever it is. And yeah, I think that
Well,
for yeah.
well, so it's you're right. Like this idea of having like it is, and it's so challenging too because I find again that's a balance, right? Because you can get into this almost reckless level of maybe this is not fair to say, but I'm going to say it. It's like the reckless level of um, responsibility,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, it's like you can't have the entire world on your back, right? It's like there's the idea of the German, the Weltschmerz, like the world pain, and it's like you can try to hold it,
Yeah.
it'll crush you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that finding that balance, right, where it's like you have enough ability to take on some responsibility, but also you're not kind of taking on more than your back or your burden can bear. Like sometimes things just fall because they fall, or maybe that
Yeah.
person they show us part of themselves that wherever they are in their own development is
Yeah.
just not necessarily integrating with your own path.
Yeah, yeah. It's like fully believing and having the trust that what falls away is not for you,
Mm-hmm.
And even for me, just going through a breakup recently and like realizing that it's not happening to me, it's happening for me,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things, right? So in business in that way, it's like if all of these things you seem to be hitting a wall somewhere, ask yourself, why am I hitting this wall? And then just being super honest with it. Is it like something that I'm doing? And just like taking that 30,000-foot view of what's happening in the situation, so you can kind of see where things are going wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
where you can step up more or actually give less and be like, my attention's not there. Coming back to, I know a lot of people talk about this, but like the why, like why am I actually doing this? Why
Mm-hmm.
am I doing what I'm doing right now? And that's super important, because when the why is that strong, then the energy's there, and then also like things will just start to like flow towards that direction, and the things that aren't part of that why
Mm-hmm.
will actually, you'll just lose your attention. You'll lose the where the energy is leaking into
Mm-hmm.
that area.
It's so difficult though sometimes to find out, at least as personally speaking, to finding like a concrete why that you feel won't fade away. And I don't know if it's maybe just the reality that some people have some people love accounting and they're like, I'm going to do accounting for 25
Yeah,
years,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
versus other times I find people are kind of I think the word is like multi-passionate or multi-potentiate or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
where you have multiple interests.
Yeah, I think we don't have to marry our why,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
It doesn't have to be like a lifelong why. It's like, this is my why for right now,
Got it.
And there could be an overarching why of like that. Maybe that's your big why, but like, why am I doing this right now? Like, why am I picking up this project right now? Well, maybe I need a little bit of cash right now, and like this is the project that's going to help me get that. That's a good enough why. It doesn't have to be this like super profound why that's like always there and never changing. Because we're changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be kind of irresponsible to think that as we change, our why stays the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's definitely deeper whys. Like for me, for example, I was just thinking about this the other day. Like my core why of like why I want to do what I want to do. It is more in depth that I don't think it will ever change. But the why I do things more on like a day-to-day basis, like brick by brick, that why is going to change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like my overarching why is like I do it for the men that have fallen before me. I do it for my family, the ones that come after me, and then I also do it for the version of myself that I've yet to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is never going to change. Like that's why I do what I do. But the projects that I pick up, the direction that soul expansion goes in, that's going to be a little bit more malleable. That's going to change a little bit as I grow, and as things start to reveal themselves
Yeah.
as well. So you can start with one why, and it doesn't have to be you don't have to be married to it.
And I think that malleability,
Hmm.
that is such at least in my own observation, what I'm seeing is that's so profound,
Hmm.
to be not static in what you think, this has to be this way, and then it's just grinding
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
against
yeah,
the face of the earth for the
yeah,
eternity. It's like, and I think that's also what we see when we engage in a practice of meditation, right? You say, watch your thoughts, or be the observer to your
mm,
thoughts. And it's like you allow this malleability to see is like, okay, so this thought is coming in, it's making me feel this way for now, but it's fine. I'm not that thing. I am not identified with that thing.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Like attaching to your emotions and like becoming that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a 10-day Vipassana just outside of Montreal, and that was like one of the biggest takeaways from that was just impermanence. You know, just
Mm.
letting things, knowing that this emotion right now, good, bad, indifferent, it will pass as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of this is just cycling through. And yeah, I think that was just a big unlock for me when I realized like don't get attached to any situation that's happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
because it will change and will adapt, and sometimes in big beautiful ways as well. And if you're attached to where it's at, you're not allowing it to grow into this big beautiful whatever's coming.
Yeah. So turning then to soul expansions and what is becoming of soul expansions,
Yeah.
what are we seeing in terms of the development right now, and where do you want to take this project and
Yeah,
this idea?
world tour. Yeah, world tour or bust. No, I see it. I see us on the Budweiser stage. I
Mm,
see us doing it in venues that cross the bridge of what where healing modalities have been for a long time,
mm,
and where music is, where music lives now, and merging that together so that people have the option to come and have a transformative experience at a place that they already feel trustworthy in, and
mhm.
already love the vibe and the experience. Like the way I see it is you have this like Woodstock vibe at Budweiser stage. Everybody's laying on the field out back. We're up front and we got our thing going on, and people are seated because you can do the breathwork seated as well. And
Mhm.
so there's like so many beautiful things. So that's one direction. We've thought about doing like a traveling circus kind of thing, just popping up in cities. We have these like geodome ideas of like just going around and being in these different cities and doing different types of soul expansions, like party vibes, also the concert vibe, and then more of like men's work, women's work, like some of that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. That would be more of like this 2 or 3 day experience. So there's a lot of curiosity around what's to come of this on my end,
Mhm.
and there's definitely more openness than what I had in the past, because I thought it's got to be this way and we got to do it this way, and
Yeah.
now I'm just a little bit more flexible into what that looks like. And yeah, but I do know one thing, that the the impact will always be first and foremost. What people are actually getting out of this will be at the top, and I started to lose that towards the end of last year. I
Mhm.
started to think about it more as a business than as what it is, and it's an offering. It's not a business; it's an offering.
Mhm.
And if I'm able to live off of it, and continue to do this for the rest of my life, that's a gift, and that's like a gift from God, universe, whatever you want to call it. And if not, then there would be something else that allows me to function and operate
Mhm.
at the level that I want to do that at. But this will always be an offering, and this will always be something that I want to share with everybody.
Mhm. And it's, I mean, so tremendously difficult to come to terms in some cases with some of that. Like I think about, for example, I was teaching DJing online with
Mm.
like a little online platform and course, and it's like for the past little while, I'm gonna chalk it up mostly to impatience on my end.
Yeah, yeah,
But I was like hammering away at this thing, and I was like, I feel like I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing the lead magnets. I'm getting the list. I'm emailing my list. I'm doing the drip funnel. I'm doing this thing, blah blah blah, blah. And I'm like, I can't get this to work.
mm.
And then I had a call with just one of these agencies, digital marketing agencies, and the guy said to me, he's like, with the increasing odd costs, he was trying to sell me like a high ticket,
Yeah,
like funnel. He's like, we're
yeah.
gonna manage your high ticket funnel, everything. And I was like, cool. But he said something to me. He's like, I don't think, based at the price point you're selling this course at,
Hmm.
and where the market's at, that like you'll be able to make a good living doing this.
Yeah,
And it was a really hard point, because I was like, oh, is this just one of those points where you're like, you know, screw you, like
yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to be able to do this? Or is this, what he's saying, is this potentially reality? Because like I was thinking to myself, I was like, things are not, I'm not generating the sales I want to be generating. And it was a very difficult thing to be like, okay, well, maybe I can step away from this. Maybe I don't need to end it completely, but I can
Hmm.
take a step back, and I can just see that I've felt very frustrated, both from
Yeah.
a personal as well as business perspective, and
Hmm.
just to let this do its own thing for a while, instead of like trying to force it into this modality and like it's sink or swim
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we. we always know the truth,
Mm.
right? We always know what the right answer is, and that's why sometimes it's hard to hear, and we don't want it to be the truth, but we we know it. We know it deep down, and then we can make decisions based on that,
Mhm.
and realize that okay, maybe this is like you said, it's not something that I just completely disregard, but its purpose changes. And what the actual purpose of what I'm doing changes. I'm still able to do what I love and what I
Mhm.
want to do, but the purpose of it is readjusted and moved into a different category. Maybe it, maybe it starts as a top of funnel thing into something else or
Mm.
whatever, right? But yeah, I think just being super honest with ourselves is
Mhm.
like the first place to start. And then, you know, yeah, when it comes to business, like, all the stuff that we're avoiding is probably what we have to do,
Yeah.
like the numbers and like that stuff. I'm just like, nah, we'll figure that out later. I just want to create and do
Yeah.
whatever. But then, the numbers allow you to sustain
Yeah.
longer and to create more and
Yeah.
to, yeah, just like express yourself in ways that you wouldn't be able to without, a system and all of that in place. So yeah, it's a balance. It's definitely a balance.
Well, even the sustainability aspect, I think that's an important part because I was talking to an artist and I was saying, I think sometimes when it comes to art, it's like you give so much
Mm,
to it. And at a certain point, you have to kind of expect something back,
yeah.
right? You can't just, this also comes from a book I was reading, Is Making Money Killing Your Business?
Hmm.
Like I was saying, is like you can't just keep giving into this thing. If it's not going to give back to you at some point, you have to make a decision about what to do.
Totally.
But I think at the same time, there is this, you said, we always know the truth, but I guess in some sense, we also, the truth is that we might not know the answer, right?
Mm,
So,
yeah.
because you could say, like, oh, this is meant to be, it's not going to work. But maybe the truth is that, you have to be more open and maybe it expands in a different way
Yeah.
versus saying, like, this is the way or the highway. And, like, it's that humbleness or humility to kind of take a step back, which is challenging because, at least based on all the stories and biographies and things that I've read, it's like this person just persevered to the end and it was like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how they did it. And that's the learned pattern or story that you're then trying to adapt for yourself.
Totally. Yeah. And what we don't hear from that, or at least until we get into the full story, is like, why did that person like push through all these walls? They must have had a pretty big fucking reason to
Mm-hmm.
like, get through all of those hurdles. And if we don't have that for ourselves, we're not gonna want to push through those things because we're gonna be telling ourselves those stories that like, hey, this is actually, not it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then, you have to wrestle with those two, like the scarcity mindset, the abundance mindset, like all of these things that are chattering at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and just getting that super clear idea of what it is. So, the people that do stick with one thing and persevere through it, they have this level of understanding of like, this is it, and like this clarity around this is it. And it's not all the time, but they know that when they get into those states of like, oh, this might not be it, there's something there. There's an underlying message, belief system, something that helps them get through that, whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's the ability to adapt and to be, surrender into the outcome of like what exactly it's going to look like,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then there's some people that also believe the other way of like, I see the vision, it's got to be this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going for it no matter what, and that's, beautiful as well. It really comes down to belief.
Yeah.
And from at least what I've experienced and what I've seen, like my entrepreneurial friends,
Yeah.
whatever you really believe, not what you say you believe, what you really believe, that's what's going to manifest in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed and looked at from a personal level, because I unless you tell me, even when you tell me, I don't know if that's actually what you believe,
Mm-hmm.
right? What you believe about yourself and what you believe about the world around you and all of these things. So it really comes down to your beliefs, your values, and then I think that that's like a ripple effect. And you know yeah, these core programs that are so deep within us that
Yeah.
probably happened when we were a child or teens and stuff like that,
Yeah.
that are still lingering.
Yeah. Well, even, and the crazy thing too is you mentioned like these two paths, right? And maybe the most honest thing we can say is that maybe different people have different paths. And
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how do we get what we want.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to follow a model. And we're saying, well, if I follow this method,
Yeah.
I'll get where I want to go.
Yeah.
But then maybe the reality is that's not the method for us.
Right.
And we need to either keep looking for another method or sit and integrate and think like, okay, what is actually true, or going to those beliefs that you mentioned, like what is the underlying belief? Do I really believe that I can live abundantly, or do I really believe that I can trust somebody?
Yeah.
These kinds of things.
Yeah. Do I really believe that I deserve it?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a massive one for me, at least. Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I enough?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've been working on with my mentor Gio from Elemental Rhythm, is like believing that you are enough. Like, with the way you are right now, nothing added, nothing subtracted. Are you enough
Mm-hmm.
to yourself, not to the world around you? Because there's always going to be somebody that you're enough to, but are you enough to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, I think that that's where most of us should start,
Yeah.
and then from there you find the methodology, you find learning techniques and how you learn, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that type of stuff.
But it really does. I mean, it pulls down away all those things. Like you really. My problem though is that I don't know what the truth is, because I don't know if this is the path, right, where we follow these things and we break down these beliefs and we really, you know, or is it like you said, you figure out just where do you want to go and you just keep hammering, and then it's just mostly perseverance, and maybe that's the unfolding, that's the figuring out on the way there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always believe that, we have to take the first couple steps,
Mm-hmm.
and then the universe will meet us.
Yeah.
So it's up to us what direction we walk in. And Michael Singer, I don't know if you've heard of him,
Mm-hmm.
but he talks about like relating life to sailing, right? You can't control the waters, we can't control the winds, we can't control any of the elements that are outside the boat, but we can learn how to sail.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to go to that island over there, we need to tweak the sights a little bit. We need to batten down the hatches. We need to, create an element that we, using all of our skills, allow us to go in that one direction, or we'll just be floating aimlessly for forever. So there is this level of surrendering into the elements and everything that's happening, but then there's this skill that allows us to go step by step into the direction that we want to go to. So it's kind of like this dance of, having both of those things. So that one really helped me a lot, especially when I feel like I'm like, am I going in the right direction here? But the silence and the stillness, like that's, for me, the easiest way to get to my truth. Just figuring out what the answers are, like that, and then sitting long enough, because it'll come. It'll come. It's just a matter of waiting.
Yeah, the eternal question. Well, Freddie, this has been
Yeah,
quite the exploration
yeah.
into to different worlds and aspects of the internal journey of entrepreneurship. Because I feel like a lot of the time this is not what is seen. It's mostly here's where I succeeded, right?
Yeah.
This is at the end point, and it's you don't get to see that whole inner transformation that had to happen. And it's not as open. I think it's getting more openly discussed, like the transformation that people had to go through.
Yeah.
If you wanted to leave the audience with anything, what would you say?
Oh man, what would I leave the audience with?
Yeah.
I would say you already have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You have it deep within yourself, and give yourself the grace and the patience and the stillness to find it within yourself, and do some breath work.
Incredible. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to this episode of Robert Meets World. Be sure to check out soulexpansion.co.
Yes.
Is that right? And Freddie, do you want to drop your website, social media, anything like that?
Yeah, just Instagram's the best way. Just at Freddy Sounds, Freddy Sounds.
Yeah.
And I'd love to connect. So
yeah,
hit me up anytime.
Looking forward to seeing the Budweiser stage.
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah.